I am in Melbourne, and that is basically going to be the topic of this episode of Chi Life. So, if you've been following the vlog for a while, not that long actually, you may recall that a couple of weeks ago, it's probably a couple of weeks ago, one of the vlogs was about breaking inertia, and it was about myself in particular. I probably talked about some other things in there as well, but that I was taking a trip to Melbourne and going to be teaching some Qigong workshops here, and that was the first time I would have traveled internationally to teach workshops since before the start of the pandemic. So that's where I am now. So this is kind of a follow along vlog, really. Just letting you know where things are at. And I'm not much of a travel vlogger, but while I talk about things, I am going to give you some visuals of what I've been doing today in Melbourne, a few of the Melbourne sites. Also, you may notice Melbourne's a pretty big city, big busy city, so we're going to have a variety of different city noises in the background behind us as well. I'll try and clean the audio up so it's not too distracting, but that was just some kind of sound off a ferry, and there's going to be all sorts of noises going on around us. Anyway, before I get into too many of the details about my day today visiting Melbourne, it probably makes sense to maybe quickly tell you a little bit about the workshops coming up, because some of you might want to come if you happen to be in Melbourne or around Melbourne, or if you just know someone who's nearby Melbourne who might be interested in a Qigong workshop, you might want to pass on the information to them. So I'm doing 3 workshops while I'm here. So 2 are on Sunday, so they're relatively short workshops, but there's going to be one on Qigong for aligning with the seasons, particularly Christmas, and then another one which is about Qigong for emotional balance. And then on Tuesday next week, just a few days away, I'm going to be in Geelong, which is just outside of Melbourne, and doing a workshop on an introduction to Qigong walking. So that's what's coming up. I will put a link below in the description of the video, where you can find all the information about those. Okay, so back to my time in Melbourne so far. Feels really good to be here. As I mentioned before, it is my first time leaving New Zealand since before the pandemic, particularly to teach Qigong workshops. And that was something I used to do a lot of. I'll come back to that later. I'll talk more about that later. I guess to begin with, just impressions of Melbourne. So I have been here a couple of times before. I haven't spent a lot of time here, but a little bit. And I must say I like Melbourne as a city. Every time I've been here, I've really enjoyed it. The centre of the city is really walkable, and within the city centre there's lots of places with lots of character. There's interesting, unusual places. There's lots of beautifully landscaped public spaces. There's lots of arts, cultural centres, lots of sporting venues, a vibrant mix of different cultures, and of course, those cultures retain things from their origin, but then at the same time, they take on their own unique character, being here in Australia and particularly Melbourne. So, for example, this sushi that I'm eating here, most places in the world, the sushi would be cut up into individual small pieces, whereas here in Australia, they do these longer pieces, which I understand is like a very particularly Australian thing. So really interesting, vibrant mix of things that you see here in Melbourne, and there always seems to be a lot going on. Now, I know that's my impression right now as someone visiting. One of the things I did today was I met up with a couple of the people who are collaborating and organising some of the workshops here. So I met up with Emma and also Tanya, who are helping with workshops on Sunday. And chatting to them when we met up, we did talk a little bit about how, my first impressions of the city. And they were saying it was so nice to hear that, because for them, they went through all of the time with the very extensive lockdowns here in Melbourne, and saw Melbourne go through a really hard time. And to them, they see it like it hasn't fully bounced back yet. But to me at this point, as someone from outside, it looks very much like when I've been here before. And really interesting to see that, actually, because sometimes, certainly visiting some parts of the world, when I haven't been somewhere for a few years and then go back, sometimes there's a massive transformation, even in the space of a few years. And so China would be one example of that. Certain parts of China certainly, where last time I was in China was actually immediately before the pandemic as well. And it had been a few years since I've been there before that, and particularly being in Beijing, like between one visit and the next, it was only a few years in between, but wow, what a transformation. And then, sometimes it's a little bit more in between. An example of that I've experienced is visiting Belgrade in Serbia, where I don't know how many years it was between visits, but maybe 3 or 4 between a couple of my visits. And it wasn't so much that the building and infrastructure changed so much, but I really noticed the change in culture between visits a few years apart. There was like this really noticeable change. Whereas here in Melbourne, it really looks and feels very much to me, very much like it has been in previous visits. And again, as I mentioned, that's a good thing. I really enjoy Melbourne as a city. I'll show you just a little video of what's going on here right now, because the footage that I took earlier was earlier in the day. It wasn't so busy, but now, my goodness, this whole area the footpath is pretty busy, but all these other areas are just swarming with people. An amazing crowd of people coming out, enjoying the atmosphere here in the centre of Melbourne. Alright, I took a little bit of a break from filming because I think it's probably getting a little bit too noisy around me with all those people out at restaurants and places like that. But great to see the city so vibrant. And this is just one little area down by the river. I'm sure there's a lot more going on elsewhere in the city. So I guess back to my experience being here the first day, it's been a really relaxed day for me. I've really just spent it walking around, feeling the energy of the place really in a very real sense, and refamiliarizing myself with being here. Recording a few vlogs, not just this one, recording some other ones as well. And yeah, it's been nice to be here. Oh, it's getting very noisy again. And for me personally, it feels like it's achieving the purpose that I hoped it would, in terms of doing something I haven't done in a long time, starting to open up my horizons, open up my way of thinking. Our environment, what we're doing, really does have a big effect on us. And I've spent a long time over the last several years, a bit restricted by just being within New Zealand, not doing some of the things I used to do. And this feels like, some of that's starting to wake up for me again. All of the potential, all of those good things that come, just from travel itself, but also from meeting with different people, experiencing different things, and also sharing the Qigong that I teach more broadly. So this isn't going to be the only vlog from Melbourne. This is just the first one, just my first day here. I'm sure I'll have a few more specifically about my time here in Melbourne, particularly about the workshops. And also there'll be a few other vlogs that I record here as well. So yeah, a little bit of a different one from other ones, but nice to have something, you know, not just talking about a topic, but about things that are going on as well. So anyway, I look forward to seeing you on another vlog soon.